Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath ki jai, Shri Giriraj Govardhan ki jai, Shri Gaura Hari ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naranchaivam Narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiret Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shlokir Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Shrinvata Gata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtanaha Hridiyanta Stohi Abhadrani Vidunoti Surat Satam. Hare Krishna. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 24, chanting the song sung by Lord Shiva, text number 55. Tam duraradhyam aradhya satamapi durapaya ekanta bhaktya ko vanchet padamulam vinabahi tam duraradhyam aradhya satamapi durapaya ekanta bhaktya ko vachet padamulam vinabahi tam duraradhyam aradhya satamapi durapaya ekanta bhaktya ko vanchet padamulam vinabahi tam duraradhyam aradhya satamapi durapaya ekanta bhaktya ko vanchet padamulam vinabahi tam duraradhyam aradhya satamapi durapaya ekanta bhaktya ko vanchet padamulam vinabahi tam unto you duraradhyam very difficult to worship aradhya having worshipped satamapi even for the most exalted persons durapaya difficult to obtain ekanta pure bhaktya by devotional service ka who is that man vanchet should desire padamulam lotus feet vina without bahi outsiders. Translation. My dear Lord, pure devotional service is even difficult for liberated persons to discharge, but devotional service alone can satisfy you. Who will take to other processes of self-realization if he is actually serious about the perfection of life? Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The word Satam refers to transcendentalists. There are three kinds of transcendentalists, the Jnani, Yogi, and Bhakta. Out of these three, the Bhakta is selected as the most suitable candidate to approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is emphasized herein that only one who is outside devotional service would not engage in searching for the lotus feet of the Lord. Foolish people sometimes maintain that God may be attained in any way, either by karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, etc. But here it is clearly stated that it is impossible to obtain the mercy of the Lord by any means but bhakti yoga. The word duraradhya is especially significant. It is very difficult to attain the lotus feet of the Lord by any other method other than bhakti yoga. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimadi Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pascha Chadesha Tarine Vanchakalpatarupyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. My dear Lord, pure devotional service is even difficult for liberated persons to discharge, but devotional service alone can satisfy you. Who will take to other processes of self-realization if he is actually serious about the perfection of life? Hare Krishna. Thank you for this opportunity of devotional service. I pray that I may speak something that is in accordance with Srila Prabhupada's teachings, as well as pleasing and practical to the hearts and minds of all of the devotees. So today's purport is very short, very sweet. It's kind of like a very brief, you could say, summary of what the Bhagavad Gita is all about in one sense, or a significant part of the Bhagavad Gita. So Prabhupada is speaking about the different kinds of transcendentalists that there are on the spiritual path, and how even amongst transcendentalists, not all are equal. There is one who is the highest, the Bhakta. The word satam is used here too as a general terminology for all of the transcendentalists, or the realized souls. And there are so many different kinds, the jnanis, the yogis, the bhaktas, all of these categories. But amongst them, Lord Shiva is emphasizing, as well as Srila Prabhupada is reiterating in the purport, that the bhakta, the devotee, is the most suitable candidate to approach Krishna from all of them. And Srila Prabhupada further emphasizes that there is no other method. He describes karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga. No method but bhakti yoga can actually guarantee attaining the mercy or the satisfaction of the Lord. If you want mercy and satisfaction, the only efficient way to do that is through the process of bhakti yoga. And you would think, okay, let's get a bit into that. Bhagavad Gita describes in the very beginning, I think it's in the 3rd chapter, about the different places, for example, where lust resides. And Krishna describes one place where lust resides as being the intelligence. So if you would think already, just from that point of view, we would understand if lust resides in intelligence, then knowledge is not the best thing to have in one sense, if something like lust can reside in our intelligence. And we look up at the jnanis, right? We read about them. Maybe we don't know any in the current age of Kali Yuga, but we read about them in Prabhupada's purports, in the works of the acharyas. Sometimes, the jnanis, they're engaged in this constant study of philosophy and scripture and the Vedas, and sometimes it's very dry. It's just theoretical engagement, nothing beyond that. It's very austere, right? There's nothing, well, externally you could say there's nothing joyful about this just constant study of scripture, right? But if you compare that just to the process of bhakti yoga, we know there are 9 processes to engaging in devotional service, as compared to sitting and studying thousands and thousands of pages of literature and verses and commentaries and arguments and thesis and all of this. The process of Bhakti Yoga is so inclusive for anyone and everyone, because study is not everyone's cup of tea in that sense, right? Krishna gives us 9 processes of engagement, so anyone and everyone can take part, right? And the verse advises that pure devotional service is even difficult for liberated persons, even for transcendentalists, for pure self-realized living entities. It's difficult even for them. But Lord Shiva says, but that alone can satisfy Krishna. So we can understand from that the process of Bhakti Yoga is a way that Krishna looks for ways to bring us towards sincerity towards Him, not to artificial detachment through repression of desires and disengaging from the world. The process of Bhakti Yoga is very inclusive, it's not exclusive. The Jnani, through their study, they may cut off from the world. And Krishna doesn't advise that to the Bhakti Yogi. He says, no, you live and you work in the world, but you do it as an offering to me. Everything is done as an offering to me. So the process of Bhakti allows all of us to find our perfection in life through devotional service. And we see that through the examples in the Bhagavad Gita, that how, action or work becomes action in Krishna consciousness. Knowledge becomes spiritual knowledge. Meditation becomes, mantra meditation, for example. Everything has a space in service to Krishna. And that is the end or the ultimate goal of devotional service. And in the verse, Lord Shiva, it's kind of a rhetorical question, but it's also a challenge in one sense, you could take it. To those who consider, other spiritual practices, mysticism, meditation, philosophical knowledge, as the ultimate end of spiritual life. It's a challenge to people who think like that. Lord Shiva is saying that if you are truly seeking perfection in your life, that the only meaningful way to do this is through the worship of the Lord. And particularly, the word is used padamulam, the lotus feet, right? The worship of the lotus feet of the Lord through ekanta bhaktya. Ekanta bhakti, exclusive, unwavering devotion unto Him. We know from the Bhagavad Gita, we do read about these 3 kinds of transcendentalists, the Jnani, the Yogi, and the Bhakta, right? 3 kinds of transcendentalists, and we learn also about what's called the Yoga ladder. So, in the Bhagavad Gita, these 3 parts, Jnana, Yoga, and Bhakti, they're not, completely separate from each other. They're actually sequential in the way they work. As you go through one, as you rise through the ranks, as you climb the ladder, you come to the next one, right? You reach something higher than you did in the previous process. It's like, we have a schooling system. You start in kindergarten, and once you've learned everything there is to learn in kindergarten, then you go to grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. You progress through life like that. The yoga ladder is something like that. You start at the bottom, you work your way up through the processes. As you get higher and higher, there is more to learn on each rung, ultimately culminating in Bhakti Yoga, devotional service to the Lord. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna that as one progresses on the yoga ladder, there are 2 things that should be happening, right? One is the purification of your material desires, not the suppression or repression of artificially just denouncing what's in your heart, but the purification of them. As you get a higher taste, you give up the lower taste. So a purification of your material desires, and your spiritual knowledge increases, right? Because logically speaking, the person at the top of the ladder should be the most purified and the most knowledgeable, right? Logically thinking, if you've worked your way to the top, you would know the most and you'd be the most purified. in that sense. When you look at the Gyanis, they're very, very analytical in their approach to spiritual life. They focus on the impersonal aspect of the Lord. They have, a never-ending, exhaustive study of Vedanta, of the Vedas. Through that study, yes, they detach from matter, from the material world, from their desires. For the Jnani, when they've sort of reached a culmination, yes, I know I'm the spirit soul, right? But that knowledge in itself is just incomplete, because then you don't know what to attach to. In the material world, we're always going to be attached to something. So when you're a Jnani, yes, I have this theoretical knowledge, Aham Brahmasmi, I'm the spirit soul, separate from matter, but then you detach, and then what do you attach to? Right? Then you look for the impersonal light, the Brahmajyoti, right? But that's impersonal, right? When you look at the yogi that engages in dhyana yoga, they're primarily engaged in severe austerity and like meditation and mystic siddhi practice. So through their yogic practice, they acquire these siddhis, these powers, smaller than the smaller, biggest than the biggest, traveling with the speed of the mind, all of these different siddhis. But what happens when you accumulate spiritual powers like this? If you are not situated properly, a desire will grow in you, because now you have power, you have ability, something you didn't have before. And if we're not spiritually secure, that leads to further material desires which keep us entangled. And why do we have to go through so many processes to come to Bhakti Yoga? Because ultimately, we're not convinced about the power of Bhakti Yoga. So we have to climb through the ladder and be purified in a way. But we know that Prabhupada describes that actually the process of devotional service is like an elevator. If you want to get to the penthouse suite in a building, you can either climb the stairs or you can take the elevator. So you can go through all of the staircase and go from one level to another. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. And ultimately when you get to the top, you'll be stronger for it, But Srila Prabhupada, Lord Chaitanya have given us an elevator process of Bhakti Yoga where you can go straight to the top, right? Why is Bhakti Yoga the highest? Because ultimately, our service to Krishna is an expression of love. And we all know that love is the most endearing thing there is at the end of the day. I can say that I love you, I can say the words all of the time, but if I actually render some service unto you, that is actually more deeper and more meaningful as an expression of love than me just saying, oh, I love you. So I can come to the temple and I can say, yes, Krishna, I love you. Thank you for everything you do for me. But if I actually engage in devotional service, if I give up my time, if I show up with sincerity and humility and do something that I know is pleasing to him, that is ultimately much more beneficial than me just coming and saying, yes, Krishna, I love you. You're the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Because it is through devotional service that we can actually understand Krishna as he really is in his capacity as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we come back to this rhetorical point, you could say, that Lord Shiva is making, that who will take to other processes of self-realization if he is actually serious about the perfection of life? And think about it, who doesn't want some kind of perfection in life? We all aspire for something very meaningful, to make something out of our lives, to be good or the best at something. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath ki jai, Shri Giriraj Govardhan ki jai, Shri Gaura Hari ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. We all want some kind of perfection in life. And Lord Shiva is reiterating that ultimately we will not find perfection anywhere else other than in reawakening our true relationship with the Lord. It is only that relationship that will bring us the perfection that we are actually looking for. In the purport, or actually the last sentence of the purport, Prabhupada says the word duraradhya is especially significant. Right? The Lord, it means it is very difficult to attain the lotus feet of the Lord by any other method than bhakti yoga. So yes, the Lord is very difficult to worship sometimes. I mean, we have one of the easiest processes of worship, and sometimes it's very hard, you know. All you have to do, what does Krishna say in the Bhagavad Gita? You know, think of me, worship me, bow down to me, and you will come to me, you know. I'm just paraphrasing in very simple words. Just those simple things are so hard, you know, to do. To think of Krishna all of the time, to chant his name all of the time, to consider him in everything that we do all of the time, in every interaction, in every experience, just to keep him in the forefront of your mind. Sometimes it's impossible. You know, you can go a whole month without thinking about Krishna, you know, or very longer. We've gone lifetimes, countless lifetimes without thinking about Krishna, right? But he's very difficult to be worshipped through any, or approached through any other means than bhakti. So if we are actually doing pure devotional service, it won't be difficult. Even the liberated souls, as the verse is saying, find it difficult to engage sometimes in this pure devotional service. And that is then the paradox of bhakti yoga. Is it simple or is it difficult? Is it simply difficult? Right? But we should also understand then, you know, we come to this process with so much of baggage, you know, baggage that we don't see, baggage that we don't even know about. We come from, you know, countless lifetimes of anarthas, of unwanted things sitting in our hearts, sitting in our consciousness, that are just lying there, covered, you know. And if you think about, you know, if there's a sort of like a pond of water, right? It's very still if you don't disturb it. But when you start like disturbing the water, everything that's at the bottom rises to the surface, right? I don't know, maybe it's like if you think of our moat, for an example, you know, it's very still on the one side, there's no fish. But when you start cleaning it, all of the algae at the bottom just comes to the top, and it's this like disgusting color, and you know, it has to be cleaned. So it's like that. We're coming, and we don't know actually what's sitting deep inside our consciousness, deep inside our heart, our subconscious. And when we begin engaging in a process of purification, it churns so many things that come out. Things you didn't even know you were struggling with, or things you didn't even know you had issues with, are just coming out, rising to the surface, right? It's like your polluted consciousness is coming out. But we carry on with the process because we hope that through our engagement, we will become purified of all of this, right? And it's like, externally, it's very easy to look like a bhakti yogi. You know, I'm sitting here with a sari, I have my tilak, my neck beads, I have a japa bag, but externally, yeah, I look the part, right? Externally, I look the part of a devotee, but does that mean that I'm necessarily free of a false ego? That's a little harder to ascertain, right? It can take very long to be purified from the perspective of just this one life that we're living. And that sometimes is a bit discouraging, right? I've been practicing for 30, 40, 50 years, but still, you know, I'm a grumpy devotee. I'm not ever youthful and ever joyful, and I don't find happiness when I pick up my bead bag, you know, after practicing for so long. But actually, when it comes to our spiritual life, the only ingredient that Krishna is actually tasting or looking for is love, is devotion in everything. Krishna is called Atma Rama, That is one of his names. Atmarama means one who is self-satisfied, right? He doesn't need anything else. He's satisfied completely within himself. And even though Krishna is Atmarama, there is one thing that he longs for: the love of his devotees, the devotion of his devotees. And that is why the path of Bhakti Yoga is the highest, because the objective of this path is actually just to love Krishna and to serve him with devotion and nothing else. And we come to this process to engage in this purification, but even different moods of service that we come with have different levels, have different gradations depending on where we are in our spiritual life, right? There are different levels of selflessness that we have, because we're all affected by the three modes of material nature to varying degrees, right? But why is the path of Bhakti Yoga so rare? Because Krishna knows that through this path of Bhakti Yoga, he will be controlled. By the pure devotee, Krishna is controlled. Krishna is at the beck and call of the devotee. So obviously, I think any logical person would think this. You would not want to give up control of yourself, to someone else, unless you have like full faith and confidence in the person, and you trust their motive with your life. You're not just going to surrender to some stranger, right? If you're going to surrender to someone, you need to know this person is a good person, They're serious. They have your best interests at heart, right? So Krishna, of course, he will test us on the path of bhakti to see what it is that our real desire is in coming to him. Yes, of course, whatever it is in your heart, you are always encouraged to come to Krishna above everything else. But Krishna will also test you to see the purity of what you are bringing to him, right? And Krishna can see, okay, you're not coming to me because you love me and you have, regard for me. You're coming to me because I can give you something, right? So why would I give you pure devotional service if you don't even love me for me, right? Just what I can give you, it sounds like one of those typical lines when a couple is fighting, it's not you, it's me. You're not with me for the love, you're with me for my money, I can see that now. Krishna is also careful in who he awards pure devotional service to, because he knows ultimately he will be controlled by the pure devotee. So he has to see as well, is this person actually coming with that purity, with that sincerity, with that surrender that's needed? And we can think about this and we can be a bit discouraged, like, I don't know if I'll ever reach that point where I can come to Krishna just to serve Krishna, right? But Rupa Goswami says we shouldn't be discouraged if this is the case. We should still continue in our practice of devotional service, continue with enthusiasm, continue with sincerity, continue with longing, with greed, right? Because if we continue in this way, the process itself will purify us. And we can achieve that space of pure devotional service. It's very rare, but it is very accessible, right? We come back to the paradox. Is bhakti simple or is it difficult, right? And how do we know that bhakti is accessible? Because of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's the Yuga avatar, right? The incarnation of the age, and he has brought the teachings of bhakti and made them so accessible. And by his example, we have Srila Prabhupada, right? Who has simplified the process and made it so attainable, so accessible for us, even if it may be hard. As Krishna says, there is no loss or diminution to anything we do on the spiritual path. Srila Prabhupada said actually that, pure devotional service, you can attain it in 1 second, or you may not attain it after millions of births. But what is the difference between the two? Prabhupada says it's a matter of understanding and accepting the facts that he presents, basically. And Prabhupada also says in one of his purports that, simply by the practice of Bhakti Yoga, we can understand the Lord in truth. We have to have that faith, that sincerity, and that longing to actually understand him in truth, right? We can understand theoretically, but the processes of devotional service that we engage in allow us to realize it in a very practical way, right? Because as Shukadeva Goswami does say that by surrender to the Lord, we are relieved of everything that attaches us to the present and future experiences and existences we have, right? Reiterating then the point that Lord Shiva is saying, that although you are very difficult to please, the saintly person will take up this path, even though it's very difficult, with one-pointed devotion, because they understand that this is the highest practice that they can engage in. And ultimately, who will want anything else other than this? Because this process of bhakti yoga is the only process that brings perfection in life. So simply through the engagement of bhakti yoga, the Lord is very easy to process. But we have this habit, well, maybe, I won't generalize, sometimes I have this habit, right? As soon as you get what you want, your devotion stops. You know, you pray very hard, very sincerely, Krishna, you know, I just need this to happen so I can be peaceful. I'll chant my rounds every single day, and while I'm praying for this thing, you know, I'll chant with so much of sincerity, so much of attention, and then it happens, and then we start slacking, right? Because we've gotten what we want, right? Or sometimes if we feel that Krishna is not giving us what we want, we don't see the bigger picture, we want something so badly, and we're praying and praying and praying, and it's just not happening, then there's some break in our devotion as well. It starts, oh Krishna, you know, you're not listening to my prayer. I'm such a good devotee. I'm so sincere. I do all of my service. I chant my rounds. Why are you not reciprocating? You know, and then there's like a break in our sincerity. That means we weren't very sincere to begin with, right? In that way. And that is ultimately why, even though it's the most easiest process in one sense, it's also the most difficult. Because the process of bhakti holds us to a very high level of accountability, right? We have to be very sincere in our humility. We have to be very serious about our surrender. It requires a one-pointed focus, ultimately. And it will ultimately purify us of everything outside of what it is we need to serve the Lord with complete devotion. So I know there's that verse, I don't know the exact translation, but it's something to the effect of, you know, if you don't want to give up your material desires, then please don't go to the Yamuna, you know, when it is the full moon, because there you will see the threefold bending form of the Lord who will purify you of everything. So if you are very attached to your material desires, please do not come to the Hare Krishna temple. You know? But if you want something a lot more deeper, a lot more sincere, that it is ultimately the highest there is of everything, then bhakti yoga is that process. Because Krishna plays the long game with us. Ultimately, he wants us to come back to him, right? So he's going to do whatever it takes to bring us back to him, to purify us. So he's going to put us in every experience and every situation to grow us in our spiritual life. He won't always give us what we want, but he'll always give us what we need. And we need to remember that. To this effect of why bhakti yoga is the highest, there is a purport in the 5th canto, chapter 18, that is the prayers of the residents by Jambudweep. I'll just read a little bit of the purport. It's that famous verse that's glorifying the residents are praying to Lord Nrsingadev. Om Namo Bhagavate Narasimhaya Namastejas Tejas Avira Virbhava. So in the purport, Prabhupada says that in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 22, Text 39, Sanat Kumar speaks the following words to Maharaj Prithu, quote, "Devotees always engage in the service of the toes of the lotus feet, of the Lord's lotus feet, who can very easily become free from the hard-knotted desire for fruitive activity. Because this is very difficult, the non-devotees, the Gyanis and the Yogis, cannot stop the waves of sense gratification, although they try to do so. Therefore, you are advised to engage in the devotional service of Krishna, the son of Vasudeva." Unquote. So that's the translation, and in the purport further to that, Prabhupada says, "Every living being within this material world has a strong desire to enjoy matter to his fullest satisfaction. For this purpose, the conditioned soul must accept one body after another, and thus his strongly fixed fruitive desires continue. One cannot stop the repetition of birth and death without being completely desireless. Therefore, Srila Rupa Goswami describes pure bhakti, devotional service, as follows. Anyabilasita sunyam jnana karmani anarvitam anukulyena krishnanu silanam bhaktir uttamam. One should render transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord Krishna favorably and without desire for material profit or gain through fruitive activities or philosophical speculation. Unless one is completely freed of all material desires which are caused by the dense darkness of ignorance, one cannot fully engage in the devotional service of the Lord. Therefore, we should always offer our prayers to Lord Nrsimhadev, who killed Hiranyakashipu, the personification of material desire." And just to round up, I was also thinking, the purport is speaking about, engaging in pure devotional service, and how that is the only thing that pleases the Lord, and how hard that is sometimes to just engage in pure devotional service, because we come with our expectations, our desires, our needs, and our wants. And also, if you're familiar, there's a concept called yukta vairagya, dovetailing everything in bhakti yoga, But sometimes, we use the term a bit loosely to just satisfy our own desires through the process of Krishna consciousness. I want to do this, so I'll say, no, I'm doing it for Krishna, but actually I want to do it. Right? There's a very interesting, if you've ever been to the deity department in the kitchen, there's all over the deity department there are very nice quotes by Srila Prabhupada about deity worship, right? The importance of practice of deity worship. So I know there's one quote, I think it's something that Pratha Maharaj said, that he was reiterating that we all like a Mahaprasadam, right? But if you want to eat something and you cook that and you offer it to Krishna, that is prasadam, right? Because you want it. So you're cooking it, but then you're offering it to Krishna. So yes, it's prasadam, Krishna will accept it. But you're doing it based off your desire. But if you cook something because Krishna likes this, right? And there's a plethora of information about what Krishna likes and doesn't like. If you cook something because Krishna says that he likes this, and then you offer it to him because he likes this, that is Mahaprasadam, because it's what he likes. So just a little thought about whatever we do in our life, in our spiritual life, our conversations, our engagements with everyone, what we do as devotional service, are we actually doing it because Krishna likes it, or because I find it easy and convenient and I like to do it? What is it supporting ultimately? Something that I want to do, or something that Krishna finds pleasing and enjoyable, right? Because that's the difference between devotional service and pure devotional service. And what Lord Shiva is also asking us in this verse, I think, is to come to a platform of spiritual seriousness, to just reflect for a moment on our practices, right? If someone is actually serious about perfection, why will they take to any other path? Lord Shiva is asking us this, right? And he's provoking us to examine what it is that we're actually doing in our life, What goals do we have for our spiritual life? Are we in a space of spiritual comfort? Or are we in a space where I'm engaged in something that I find challenging, but I know Krishna finds this pleasing, so I'll give it a go, right? And this point of satisfaction, right? satisfaction, it's such a interesting concept, right? We don't know ultimately what satisfies us as individuals. Or we may know, but it changes very, very frequently, day to day, moment to moment. What satisfied me yesterday won't necessarily satisfy me today, you know. But Krishna is not like that. Krishna is very, very simple and very, very easy to understand. And this verse is reiterating that. There is one thing that satisfies Krishna: pure devotional service, nothing else, right? It doesn't matter externally what it may look like, right? That's why bhakti is a very interesting process. There are so many ways to engage in the process of bhakti. It's not that just one thing qualifies as bhakti yoga. Externally, anything can qualify, right? But what is it presented as internally is what makes the difference to how he accepts it. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that one can understand me as I am only through devotional service. And when one is in such consciousness of me, then he can enter the kingdom of God through this process of bhakti yoga. And just to round up, one last point. I don't know if anyone noticed, but in the Sanskrit, the word aradhya is there, which means worship. If anyone is familiar, aradhya is the root word of Radharani, right? So Srimati Radharani is hidden throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam. And here is one verse where she comes up, right? Worship of the Lord. She is the one who is the greatest in worshipping the Lord. When we follow her direction, we understand what it is to actually worship with sincerity, with humility, with surrender in a way that is pleasing to Krishna. And there's just one last thing I want to share. It's actually, I actually just saw it yesterday so I was scrolling on social media. It's a memory by a disciple of Srila Prabhupada called Bhargava Dasi. He was a photographer who traveled with Prabhupada and took photos. He actually came to South Africa with Prabhupada, and he was the photographer who took, when Prabhupada was at the different programs, he took all of those photos, or most of them. So there's one remembrance where he was sharing, where he was going through a time in his spiritual life where he was having some difficulty, and he wanted to leave the movement. He wanted to leave Prabhupada. He didn't think he could practice anymore. He wanted to go and pursue his photography outside. So he came to Srila Prabhupada to tell him that he was struggling and he wanted to leave. And why I wanted to share ultimately is, we're talking about the different levels of transcendentalists, why the bhakti is the highest, or the bhakta is the highest and most qualified, and how Prabhupada's example has made such a difficult process so accessible. And this is just something about Prabhupada's mood, and also it touches on Srimati Radharani a little bit. So I went into Prabhupada's room. No one was there. He was just sitting at his desk, and I said, "Prabhupada, I'm leaving now, and I just want to pay my respects before I go." And he looked up at me from behind his desk. Now, I expected some diplomacy and courtesy. I knew Prabhupada was a gentleman. And again, you look in my eyes, I look into your eyes, and we know how much corruption is there in each other's hearts. It's there. Anyway, Prabhupada looked at me and he said, "You are leaving?" It was a long and he meant it. He was sorry to see me go. He knew who I was, and he was really sorry to see me go. But we had hardly any exchange before, and this is what blew my mind. He knew who I was, and he saw all the goodness in me. He saw my relationship to Krishna, and he loved me because he knew who I was. I didn't even know who I was, but he knew who I was. And his love for me was not based on what I appeared to be by my body, or what I even thought I was. That kind of blew my mind. Then he got up, he took his garland, which was hanging somewhere, and he walked across the room, and he put his garland on me. And he did it like I was a deity or something, which blew my mind, because I am seeing him as the guru. I'm supposed to be respectful, the teacher, the older man, and here he was doing this. And he put it on very gently, not with awe and reverence, but with affection, with appreciation, with love, with friendship. During this period, while this was happening, it was no longer, I am the guru, you are the disciple. He was showing me Vrindavan. He was saying, this is Vrindavan, where we worship each other out of appreciation for each other. Not because it says in the books that we should be nice to other devotees. No, but you are a devotee of Krishna. You are Krishna's friend. You are special. You love Krishna. An appreciation for someone. It was like he didn't feel it himself, that he felt like I had more love for Krishna than he did. And this was just blowing my mind. I could see that he was just completely exposing himself. He wasn't thinking himself to be a great devotee of Krishna. He wasn't thinking himself as being a great guru. He was just exposing himself. Even if he was, it's like that story they tell of Radharani. How Radharani is going all around Vrindavan, always observing all the other devotees to learn how to be a better servant of Krishna. And she is feeling herself to be an inferior servant of Krishna, that everybody else is a better servant. And Prabhupada showed me that feeling of inferiority that he had in terms of serving Krishna. In my mind, I'm saying, I don't want to see this. I don't want to experience this. This is disturbing. I don't know how to deal with this. It's like Maya was suddenly removed from my vision, and I'm seeing this, and it's very disturbing. All I could do was feel tremendous shame, because here I was. I came into the room and I wanted recognition for my struggle. I wanted recognition to come over and develop my life as a photographer. I wanted recognition for my service. My mind was full of these petty, egotistical ideas, and here I'm standing before this personality that was not from this plane, but from a plane of ultimate gentleness and purity and love. And I felt like a giant brute. And Prabhupada made himself completely vulnerable and was completely open and disarming when he did what he did. All I could say was, Prabhupada, I'm such a rascal. Then he looked up and the mood changed and he smiled and said, that's good. You remain a rascal your whole life. One mind-blowing thing after another is going on. And he says, Lord Chaitanya, he was a rascal also. And my mind is blown again. Is Prabhupada saying, I'm the Supreme Lord? And Prabhupada says, you know the story of Lord Chaitanya with his spiritual master? What was that story? How did that shloka go? I replied, Lord Chaitanya's spiritual master said that he was too foolish to understand the Vedanta. He should simply chant Hare Krishna. Prabhupada looked at me and smiled. And it was like one nice person just appreciating someone else. It was friendly, it was warm, it was fatherly. There was nothing else involved. In the material world, we tend to defend ourselves. It's a very heavy thing, a very heavy quality. You and me, we always need to defend ourselves. We always think, is this person going to say something that's going to upset my practice? Are you going to say anything that's going to put me in a different light with someone who's in charge? There's always this going on. But in that moment, there was nothing between me and Prabhupada. Prabhupada didn't have to preach to me that you should become like this if you want to go to Vrindavan. That was the spirit of Vrindavan. He just displayed it. It was so heavy that I had to go away to digest it. So all I could do after that smile was leave, pay my obeisances. But he had hooked me, because he showed me what the reality of Vrindavan was. Who knows what God looks like? Who knows what God's world looks like? But the qualities that he displayed that day, yeah, that's the spiritual world. They're not of this earth, of this plane of eating, sleeping, mating, or defending. They're from the plane of love, unconditional love, and that's where I got hooked. I will stop there. Any quick corrections, comments? Question, Mother Ranga Devi? Yes. Rangadevi.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for those wonderful points. Basically, most of us are not on the very high level of bhakti. And we find this throughout the Bhagavatam also. There's different personalities, like Gajendra. He called out for the Lord because of distress. And in that way, the Lord did come and help him. So yes, we may be on the lower levels of bhakti as well. And the Lord will actually purify us until we come to the higher plane. But we should not deviate from the process of bhakti. We should keep, going on. And in that way, we will attain our higher goals. And another point you were making about, offering the foods that we like to Krishna, instead. Yes, we can do that in the beginning stages. We can offer the foods that we like to Krishna. I had one devotee in my class, Bhakti Vaibhava class, and we were having a discussion, and he said that we should not make Krishna our prasad making machine.
Yeah.
And I found it was so hilarious. But this is what we do, and so basically, we can do that. Whatever we like, we can offer to Krishna until we come to the higher stage of understanding. So thank you for this wonderful class, very eloquently spoken.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, we start where we start, but don't wait for Krishna to make you a pure devotee. Prabhupada says, ultimately we fly our own plane. It's up to us. And I think it was in the last class when I was doing my previous class, where actually it was so interesting, where it was the Prabhupada was talking about Raganuga Bhakti and those more intimate things. And actually Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said that for someone who's been practicing for 15 or 20 years, they should actually be at a stage where they can start going into those things. And it's like, how do you get on that level? It's by your own endeavor. Yes, we come and we offer what we like, but again, Lord Shiva is challenging us. Spiritual seriousness must come from somewhere. And it's like there's another pastime where a Prabhupada memory where Yogeshwar was asking Prabhupada, how do you decide who's qualified and who's not? And Prabhupada just looked at him and said, don't try and find some formula to who's a pure devotee and who's not. Everyone comes, everyone engages, but yes, ultimately it's up to the mercy giver, Krishna, but you have to do your part as well. I will stop there. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol.